The desert heat shimmered on the horizon as a convoy of Egyptian ships set out from the Red Sea coast, sails full of the warm wind. The oarsmen rowed steadily, eyes fixed on the mysterious waters that stretched before them. They were bound for a place that had enchanted Egypt for centuries, a land called Punt. The name alone stirred something in their hearts, a mix of awe and yearning. Punt wasn't just a place on a map, it was a fabled source of treasures, of incense that perfumed the temples, and of gifts that came from no other land. To the people of Egypt, Punt was more than an exotic trading partner, it was an echo of the divine, a place whispered of by priests and sought after by pharaohs. For ages, Egypt's fascination with Punt grew, a spark that would flare into grand expeditions over and over. The Egyptians spoke of Punt with reverence, as if it were the land of gods or the cradle of life itself. Their records described gifts from Punt with loving detail, rare myrrh resin, fragrant incense, precious ebony wood, shimmering gold, and rare, captivating animals. These gifts weren't just luxuries, they were symbols, treasures that seemed to hold a magic of their own. Egyptian priests burned the incense in holy ceremonies, filling temples with the thick, fragrant smoke that was said to please the gods themselves. This smoke rose toward the heavens, carrying with it the hopes and prayers of a civilization. The perfumes and exotic goods that came from Punt were thought to be touched by divinity, and so Punt became more than a land of trade, it became a bridge to the gods. The first records of Punt appear almost as whispers in ancient texts. Egyptian scribes etched stories of the land into walls, each stroke of the chisel pressing the allure of Punt into stone. They spoke of people who lived in harmony with their rich, fertile land, with rivers lined with trees that bled fragrant sap. This land, unlike Egypt's parched desert, was lush and green, a fertile paradise that seemed otherworldly. The Egyptians couldn't reach it by foot, but they knew it was somewhere out there, beyond the seas, waiting to be found. And they were ready to go to great lengths to claim its treasures. It was Queen Hatshepsut, one of Egypt's most ambitious rulers, who finally turned Egypt's dreams of Punt into reality. Her fascination with Punt was almost mythical. She saw in Punt a land that had been favored by the gods, and she believed that she, too, was favored. Hatshepsut felt a kinship with this mysterious land, as though it had called to her personally. Under her orders, Egypt prepared its largest fleet yet, filling the ships with everything they would need for a long voyage. She didn't just want Punt's treasures, she wanted a relationship, a bond between two powerful lands. This wasn't merely trade, it was destiny. The journey to Punt was long and treacherous. Egyptian sailors had to brave the open sea, where fierce storms and unpredictable waves were as dangerous as the desert's blazing heat. But Hatshepsut's instructions were clear, return with the wonders of Punt. And so, the ships pressed on, driven by the promise of riches beyond imagining and the pride of bringing honor to Egypt. When the fleet finally reached Punt, they saw a land that was as beautiful and strange as they had imagined. Their arrival was met by the people of Punt, who welcomed them warmly and invited them to marvel at their fertile land. Trees with smooth bark and slender branches grew all around, their leaves shimmering under the sun. The Egyptians stared in wonder at these trees, which produced the priceless resin they called myrrh. The Puntites, as described in Egyptian records, seemed almost regal themselves, draped in fine clothes and jewelry. They welcomed the Egyptians, treating them as friends rather than conquerors, equals instead of intruders. The Egyptians marveled at the people of Punt, who seemed untouched by the harshness of the world. Some said that these people had found favor with the gods and had been given a land free from hardship. The Egyptians traded their own treasures, beautiful linens, ornaments, tools, and in return received the priceless goods of Punt. The exotic animals they saw there, giraffes, baboons, and even leopards, were unlike anything they'd seen in their own desert land. Every sight, every smell, every touch reminded them of the richness and beauty that existed beyond Egypt's borders. They filled their ships with these treasures, with myrrh trees carefully dug from the earth and fragrant resins packed in clay jars, each item a precious memory of the land they had left behind. When the Egyptians returned, laden with treasures, they were celebrated as heroes. Hatshepsut had the story of their journey carved into the walls of her temple, a testimony to her strength and vision. In these carvings, the images of Punt's people and their land are eternal, preserved for all time in stone. The Egyptian people, when they gazed upon these images, felt their own hearts swell with pride. Their queen had achieved the impossible, had reached the unreachable, and had brought back gifts from the gods themselves. Over time, the memory of Punt grew even richer, becoming a story told and retold in Egypt's temples and homes. Punt became a symbol, a dream of all things rare, beautiful, and almost mythical. It was a land of abundance in every way, but it was also a land of mystery. For even as Egypt marveled at the treasures that came from Punt, no one could say for certain where Punt lay. The Egyptians mapped the stars, they charted their own lands, but Punt remained elusive, slipping through their grasp like a dream upon waking. Each mention of Punt in their ancient records only seemed to deepen the mystery. And yet, they never stopped believing in it, because to them, Punt was more than a place on a map. It was a promise, a connection to the divine, and a reminder that there were lands beyond theirs that held secrets of the gods. As the centuries passed, Egypt's longing for Punt never waned. Pharaoh after pharaoh sought out this mysterious land, hoping to replicate Hatshepsut's journey, to feel the wonder and awe she had experienced. In the Egyptian imagination, Punt was eternal, a paradise that would never die. Egypt's people, its priests, and its rulers carried that yearning within them, a reminder that in the vastness of the world, there were still mysteries left to touch, places where the gods might walk among men. Under the soft light of early dawn, the priests of Egypt stood silently within the cool shadows of the temple, their faces lifted towards the drifting wisps of incense smoke. This smoke curled and danced in the still air, carrying with it the smell of the sacred myrrh resin brought from Punt, the land they called divine. As the priests watched it rise, they felt a presence, a connection to a place far beyond their own lands, to a world that seemed to exist between the stars and the horizon. In their hearts, Punt was more than a distant kingdom. It was sacred, untouchable, a land that belonged to the gods themselves. In the oldest tales told by the priests, Punt was more than just a place, it was woven with the origins of life and gods. They said Punt was a land blessed by the divine, a place where gods and mortals might cross paths. In temple carvings, Punt was portrayed with an otherworldly beauty, its trees heavy with golden myrrh, its rivers lined with pure ebony and ivory, its air sweetened with the scent of incense that seemed to please the gods themselves. To Egypt, this land was no mere trading partner, it was a glimpse into a paradise lost to time. The priests whispered of Punt as the land of the gods, and the name carried a weight that was almost too much to bear. They believed Punt was the origin of some of Egypt's most beloved deities, a birthplace hidden from the eyes of ordinary men. There were tales of Hathor, goddess of love and joy, who was said to have touched the earth in Punt, leaving a trace of her divinity on the land itself. Hathor was the motherly figure who watched over the people, blessing them with beauty and kindness, and in the land of Punt, her presence was almost tangible. The priests would speak of this, describing how Hathor's spirit was felt in the warm winds that swept through Punt's valleys, in the leaves that rustled with a sound like gentle laughter. They believed that Punt was a place where Hathor's spirit lived on, and where her blessings could still be felt by those who were pure of heart. But it was not only Hathor's spirit that was said to dwell in Punt. Another god, Bes, the protector of households, laughter, and children, was also believed to have roots in this distant land. Bes was a strange god by Egyptian standards, with his short, stocky figure and a face that seemed to laugh and snarl at once. He was a god of joy, a trickster who warded off evil and kept harm from homes and families. In their stories, the Egyptians said that Bes had come from Punt, a god born of the wild and ancient forests that grew there, where the trees hid secrets older than time. Some priests claimed that to hear the laughter of children or the beat of a drum was to feel Bes's spirit, echoing from Punt to Egypt, filling their lives with happiness and protection. These myths made Punt into something more than even the priests could fully explain. It was a sacred place, a land untouched by the hands of war or famine. Some said it was the first land that the gods created, a place meant to show what the world could be in its purest form. It was an idea that brought comfort and wonder to the people of Egypt, who believed that this sacred land held a part of themselves, their gods, and their dreams. For the priests, this belief ran deeper than myth. They felt that the land itself was alive, that it breathed with the spirit of the gods, that its rivers pulsed like veins carrying divine blood. Every time they used the myrrh from Punt in their rituals, they felt a connection to this divine world, as though they were reaching across the vast distances to touch a land that could never truly be reached. They would prepare the resin with trembling hands, knowing that as they burned it, they were inviting the gods of Punt into their midst. It was a ritual that demanded silence, reverence, and a heart open to the mysteries of the divine. In the stillness of these moments, the priests felt as if they were standing at the very edge of something infinite, something that stretched beyond human understanding. They believed that each wisp of smoke was a message, a bridge between them and the gods who had walked the earth in Punt. When they burned the incense, they imagined the gods themselves, glancing down from that distant land, pleased with the offering. They could almost hear the murmurs of Hathor's voice in the quiet rustle of the temple cloths, almost feel the protection of Bes in the warmth that filled the room. Egypt's fascination with Punt was as much a yearning as it was a belief. They yearned for the touch of the gods, for a closeness that would make them feel whole, and in Punt, they believed this closeness was possible. Punt became a symbol, a place that felt both near and far, like the memory of a dream that faded with each passing day yet lingered in the heart forever. For the people of Egypt, it was the promise of something pure, something that whispered of a time before sorrow or pain. In their minds, Punt was an Eden, a land free from the struggles of mortal life, untouched by the burdens of time and decay. To the priests, this distant land was proof that there was still beauty and wonder left in the world, that the gods had not abandoned them. They told stories of the rivers in Punt that shimmered under the sun, their waters so clear that the very souls of the gods could be seen within them. They spoke of the trees, ancient and wise, their branches heavy with fruits and flowers that only the gods could taste. In the stillness of the temple, as the priests recounted these tales, their voices would soften, as if they were afraid that speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile magic of Punt. For the people of Egypt, these tales of a divine land gave them hope, a hope that somewhere out there, the gods were watching, guiding them, and that one day, they too might find themselves in that blessed land. And so, Punt became an anchor for their faith, a place that lived on in their hearts, a land of dreams and visions, a promise that even in a world filled with mystery, there were still lands where gods and men might walk side by side. The salty scent of the sea filled the air, mingling with the sweat of the rowers as their hands gripped the oars tightly. Beneath them, the wooden hull creaked and groaned as it cut through the blue waters of the Red Sea. This was no ordinary journey, no simple trading venture to nearby lands. Ahead of them lay the unknown, a mystery called Punt, a land so distant and elusive that few had seen it with their own eyes. Yet here they were, a band of sailors and traders, leaving behind the familiar banks of the Nile to chase the dream of Punt across vast, uncharted waters. The Red Sea was both their path and their enemy. Under the harsh sun, the waters shimmered like molten glass, hiding treacherous reefs and currents that could pull a ship off course. The winds could be friend or foe, carrying them swiftly southward or pushing them back, reminding them of the power that lay in the sea's depths. Yet they pressed on, filled with a resolve that ran as deep as the sea itself. These sailors, trained by years of navigating the Nile, had ventured further than any others, guided by tales that stretched back for generations, tales of the wealth and wonder that awaited them if they could just reach the fabled land. Egypt's ships were miracles of their time, broad, sturdy, built from acacia and cedar wood that was brought from distant lands. These were ships that carried dreams and ambitions. Each vessel was adorned with carefully crafted sails, made from linen dyed in hues that would shine brightly under the sun, a symbol of the pride and skill of those who built them. But even the finest ships were no match for the unpredictable forces of the open sea. Storms could tear through the sails like fragile cloth, and towering waves could toss the ship as if it were nothing more than a toy. There were stories of crews who had vanished, swallowed whole by the endless expanse, never to be seen again. But the men who set out toward Punt did not turn back. Every sailor had grown up hearing of Punt, a place that felt more like a dream than a real destination. They had listened to elders speak of it, of its treasures, its beautiful forests, its creatures unlike any others. They knew that every stroke of the oar brought them closer to something that lay at the edge of the world, a place where they might set eyes on the riches that had enchanted Egypt for centuries. The anticipation and fear blended in their chests like the winds and waves outside, filling each moment with a sense of purpose they could not find elsewhere. Their course took them south, through waters they had to learn as they traveled. Unlike the predictable flow of the Nile, the Red Sea held secrets of its own. They followed the stars at night, their eyes tracing patterns across the heavens, knowing that these constellations might be their only guide home. And by day, they kept their course by watching the coastlines and islands that rose like ancient, silent guardians from the depths. These routes, these landmarks, they became legends, passed down by word of mouth, from sailor to sailor, from father to son, a shared map that led them ever closer to Punt. To reach the Red Sea itself, the ships had to be dragged overland from the Nile, hauled through desert stretches where the sand bit into the wood and the ropes dug deep into the hands of those who pulled. This grueling journey, from river to sea, was a testament to Egypt's determination. They built port cities along the coast, places where the weary crews could rest and resupply, where their ships could be repaired before facing the next leg of the journey. These port cities, like Wadi Gawasis and Mursa Gawasis, were as vital as the ships themselves, bustling with workers, craftsmen, and merchants, each contributing in their own way to the voyage that lay ahead. The sight of the port was always a moment of relief and pride, a bustling scene of ships being prepared, oars being crafted, provisions being loaded onto deck. The port city's heartbeat matched that of the sea, and the men felt it in their bones. Some of them would walk to the shore and stare out at the water, watching it stretch far beyond what they could see, wondering if they would soon set foot in Punt, wondering if this time, they would be the ones to bring back the treasures of that sacred land. To them, Punt was not just a destination, it was a promise of rare spices and fragrant incense, of woods that were rich and dark, of creatures that roamed its jungles and plains with a grace they had never seen. They had heard stories of animals with spots, with graceful necks that seemed to reach the sky, of ivory tusks that gleamed like polished stone, and they ached to see them. Every sailor dreamed of the moment they would disembark on Punt's shores and fill their eyes with wonders, their hands with treasures. They dreamed of the myrrh trees, heavy with resin, of the cool waters that would quench their thirst after the long and weary voyage. But the sea was unforgiving, and many would not make it. In the fiercest storms, the waves rose like walls, crashing against the ship, soaking the men to their bones. Each man on board gripped his oar tightly, his knuckles white, his heart pounding, as the storm tossed them, reminding them that the journey to Punt demanded everything: strength, bravery, resilience. And the storms were not the only danger. The open sea held predators, sharp-finned and swift, gliding beneath the surface, invisible until the flash of a tail or a shadow just beneath the hull. Yet none of this deterred the Egyptians. They were bound by something stronger than fear, the call of Punt. When they finally caught sight of its shores, their voices rose in cries of triumph, a sound that echoed across the water. There, in the distance, was the land they had longed to see, its forests dark and inviting, its cliffs gleaming under the sun. The men's hearts raced as they brought their ships closer, each rower feeling the swell of pride in his chest, knowing he had braved the impossible, had reached the land where gods themselves might walk. As they approached, the crew readied their vessels for docking, their hands moving with practiced grace, each man knowing his role. They would not show weakness, they would not falter. They had faced the sea's fury and won. Now, on these shores, they would step into a world that had only lived in their stories until now. And with every precious item they gathered, every fragrant tree they loaded onto the ships, they would carry home proof that Punt was real. For Egypt waited with bated breath, hoping to see the treasures of Punt arrive once again, the riches that would fill their temples, the scents that would fill their hearts with wonder. They called it the land of Punt, a world filled with mystery and beauty, a place whispered about in ancient Egypt. Yet, in all the centuries since, no one has truly found it. Somewhere out there, beyond Egypt's fertile banks and the hot sands of the desert, lay a land of abundant trees, gleaming ivory, and golden myrrh, a place that had slipped from history into myth. Egypt's kings and priests revered it, merchants dreamed of it, and sailors risked everything to reach it. But today, it remains hidden, eluding even the most determined searchers, a ghost in the mist of time. Through old records, they tried to map it. Poring over scrolls, tracing long-faded ink strokes, explorers followed vague hints in Egyptian inscriptions, in murals that showed lush green forests and strange animals. Some saw the clues pointing south, along the curve of the Red Sea, where the deserts met the mountains in harsh beauty. Some whispered of Somalia, of its coast lined with thick, fragrant trees, and its people who carried the resinous treasure that the pharaohs craved. There, on that coast, stood trees that smelled of myrrh and incense, whose resin clung to the air with the rich scent of ancient forests, filling the breeze as if in answer to Egypt's longings. Others felt it lay farther north, maybe in Yemen, across the sea, a place whose mountains held secrets of their own. Yemen, with its steep cliffs and deep valleys, seemed to carry that same fragrance, that same mystery. Here was another ancient land with treasures and beauty that seemed to fit the vision of Punt. Yemen's coastline, rugged and strong, could have called out to Egyptian sailors, daring them to cross the dangerous waters to find what lay beyond. And as they imagined that place, they wondered if this was where their ancestors had once traded goods, exchanged greetings, where cultures had mingled in a shared awe for the land's beauty and blessings. But then, another voice spoke up: what if Punt lay even closer, just beyond the Egyptian borders, hidden in the rich, rugged lands of Sudan? Sudan, with its golden deserts and green stretches along the Nile, was a land that seemed both familiar and exotic. Its landscapes shifted from arid sands to fertile valleys, and its people lived alongside the mysteries of ancient kingdoms lost to time. Could Punt have been a part of that world, right there, so close, yet separated by distance and years? Sudan's deserts held memories, and maybe those memories held the whispers of Punt, buried beneath centuries of shifting sands. And still, others looked further into the shadows, towards Eritrea, another contender for Punt's forgotten geography. Eritrea's coastline, both wild and breathtaking, stretched along the Red Sea, dotted with small harbors and paths that wound inland through mountains and valleys, just as Egypt's scribes had described. The land was tough, filled with cliffs that seemed to cut into the sky, and forests that grew dense and dark. People had traveled these paths, lived by its shores, and known the taste of its wild fruit, the scent of its hidden forests. Here, it seemed, was another home that could have birthed Punt's beauty. Yet, as each generation searched, Punt slipped further away, and finding it seemed less like solving a puzzle and more like chasing a shadow. The maps were unclear, the words on ancient inscriptions seemed to twist and hide their meaning, leaving those who longed to find Punt staring into empty distances, reaching for a place that no longer spoke its name aloud. Egypt's records offered hints but no clear directions, no precise descriptions. They spoke of trees with resin that dripped like honey, of rivers that wound through forests like veins, but they did not tell of distances, of paths, of landmarks that could guide the searcher's feet. Punt was everywhere and nowhere, waiting only in the imagination, its beauty fading but never fully lost. Archaeologists scoured these lands, hoping for clues, some trace of Egyptian goods, or a mark of Punt's people left behind. In Somalia, in Yemen, in Sudan, and Eritrea, they sifted through layers of soil, looking for pottery fragments, for beads, for carvings that might tell them that this was where Egypt had come, where Egypt's traders had looked in awe upon the riches of Punt. But even as they dug, Punt stayed silent, its secrets kept just out of reach. It was as if Punt itself had decided to vanish, taking with it the memories of Egyptian sailors, of merchants and priests who had stood on its shores and offered gifts in return for its bounty. Why was it so difficult to find? Was Punt truly real, Or was it a dream woven into Egypt's history, a vision of paradise that belonged to no land and every land at once? Some historians began to wonder if it had been a name for multiple places, or perhaps an idea, a word used to describe any land of plenty beyond Egypt's borders. Perhaps Punt was a reflection of Egypt's own longing, a symbol of their search for beauty, wealth, and connection with the divine. And yet, despite the theories, despite the evidence scattered across these lands, Punt held back, refusing to surrender itself to certainty. For those who sought it, the search was more than academic, it was a call from across the ages. They yearned to stand where Egypt's emissaries had stood, to breathe in the scent of myrrh from the source, to touch the ground where Egyptian feet had walked so long ago. They imagined seeing what they had seen, feeling the weight of that land's beauty, the thrill of standing in the place that even the gods were said to have loved. It was a quest not only for geography but for connection, a way to feel the same awe, the same reverence, that Egypt had felt centuries before. But Punt, if it existed, remained silent, its landscapes unmarked and untouched. The Red Sea stretched on, endless and unyielding, its waves hiding the secrets that lay beneath, as if protecting the memory of Punt from those who might one day understand it. And somewhere, perhaps, beyond those waves, Punt waited still, its trees growing wild, its rivers flowing through lands untamed, a mystery too precious to be known. The moment an Egyptian envoy stepped onto Punt's soil, they were transported to a world that shimmered with color, scent, and sound unlike anything they had ever known. The air was thick with the rich, earthy smell of myrrh and frankincense, resins so precious they seemed to pulse with the sunlight filtering through the trees. In the distance, strange and graceful animals moved silently, their eyes watching the newcomers with curiosity and grace. These were not the creatures of Egypt's plains or its deserts, they were beings from another world, a world of abundance and wonder, a place that seemed to belong to the gods. There, in the heart of Punt, grew the treasures that Egypt could not live without. The myrrh trees, with their twisted branches and thorny trunks, were sacred guardians of a perfume that brought the soul closer to heaven. The Egyptians prized myrrh as a bridge between mortals and the divine, its smoky fragrance rising up in temple ceremonies, curling through the air like a whisper to the gods. Myrrh was more than just a scent, it was a promise, a blessing, a prayer. It connected the land of Egypt to the heavens and, through Punt, to the earth. The Egyptian priests would speak of it with reverence, preparing it as an offering, knowing each breath of its aroma brought them closer to their gods. Beside the myrrh, frankincense trees stood tall, their resin glistening in the sun like liquid gold. To the Egyptians, frankincense was magic itself, an incense that filled the temples with its calming presence, that soothed the spirit and brought peace to troubled hearts. For a priest to burn frankincense was to cleanse the air, to make it sacred, pure. To touch its resin was to touch the breath of Punt, to carry a piece of that legendary land back to Egypt, to let it live in their homes and temples. Frankincense was an unseen balm, a silent prayer, a comfort that Egypt cherished deeply. Then there was ebony, wood so dark and rich it seemed to hold the secrets of the world within its grain. This ebony, smoother and heavier than any wood the Egyptians had ever seen, was crafted into furniture and statues, into treasures fit for a pharaoh. To touch it was to feel the cool, solid strength of Punt's forests, to be reminded of a world where trees grew thick and tall, where life was not limited by the harsh desert but was lush, bountiful. Ebony was rare, cherished, and enduring, a gift from a land that seemed blessed by every earthly treasure. Each piece of it felt like holding a fragment of Punt's dark, mysterious beauty. But the treasures of Punt were not limited to trees or resin, they were living, breathing wonders. Egypt's envoys would return with stories of animals that seemed touched by magic, creatures that towered above them, graceful and strange. There were baboons, lively and alert, with knowing eyes and quick movements, their intelligence almost unsettling. To bring a baboon back to Egypt was to bring a spark of Punt's own spirit, its wild energy, and its laughter. In Egypt, these animals were symbols of Thoth, the god of wisdom, and watching them was like watching divine knowledge itself in playful form. They were sacred, fascinating, and alive with the mystery of a land far beyond the Nile. But if the baboons amazed them, it was the giraffes that captured their hearts entirely. Tall, silent, and graceful, giraffes were like gentle giants from another world. Their long necks reached towards the treetops, their legs moved with an elegance that was mesmerizing. For the Egyptians, to see a giraffe was to see a being that walked between the heavens and the earth, as if they carried a part of the sky within them. Their patterns, their quiet presence, they were symbols of a grace and beauty that could only be born in Punt. To bring a giraffe back to Egypt was an achievement of wonder, it was to possess a piece of Punt's own soul, something both earthly and otherworldly. Every animal, every tree, every resin was more than just a trade good. They were symbols, pieces of a world that Egypt longed for, a place that was said to be blessed by the gods themselves. Punt was more than just a source of goods, it was a place that seemed to exist outside the ordinary world, a land of abundance and mystery, a place that offered everything Egypt's heart could desire. The treasures of Punt were sacred because they carried a part of that magic, that otherworldliness. The Egyptians who saw them knew they were looking upon gifts not just of another land, but of a paradise, a place as close to heaven as one could reach on earth. The first time an Egyptian envoy set foot in the land of Punt, he must have felt an unfamiliar thrill, a sense that he was stepping not just onto foreign soil, but into the presence of people who held an ancient power, a wisdom that felt almost otherworldly. The people of Punt were not strangers or simple traders, they were allies, equals in a way that no other kingdom had been. They greeted their Egyptian visitors with dignity, grace, and a sense of ceremony that left the Egyptians humbled and in awe. They were noble, their leaders revered and wise, their people strong and kind. In their gaze was a quiet understanding, a warmth that stretched out like the shade under a tall tree in the afternoon. The Egyptians, with all their knowledge and pride, saw in the people of Punt a spirit they could not easily describe, a strength that was not only physical but rooted deep in their culture, in a connection to the land that was sacred and unbreakable. The Egyptians noted their calm, their nobility, their pride. The Puntites did not flaunt their wealth, but it was clear in their way of life, in the elegance of their clothing, in the precious stones that adorned their necks and wrists, in the way they spoke with a calm confidence, assured of their place in the world. Egypt respected this and treated them with a reverence that went beyond diplomacy, for the Egyptians felt that Punt held a spiritual power, a wisdom that could not be learned but was somehow woven into their very being. Diplomatic ties with Punt were unique, an honor that Egypt bestowed only upon a chosen few. The pharaoh did not see himself as above the ruler of Punt, but as an equal, extending his hand in friendship and trust. When envoys from Egypt arrived in Punt, they were greeted with honor and respect, led to gatherings where the two lands exchanged not only goods but words of peace, tokens of goodwill. In these meetings, there was no arrogance, no demands, there was only mutual respect. The Egyptians marveled at this, for it was rare for them to meet a people they did not seek to conquer, but rather, to understand, to learn from. They felt that Punt offered something that could not be taken by force, a gift that had to be given freely, a wisdom and a strength that could not be contained. The pharaoh Hatshepsut herself honored this bond, commissioning great ships to travel the Red Sea to Punt. She knew that to trade with Punt was to touch something sacred, something that brought Egypt closer to the divine. And so, her envoys carried gifts that symbolized Egypt's respect and admiration, gold and linens, offerings of fine craftsmanship. In return, the people of Punt offered their own treasures, not only of incense and ivory but of friendship and trust, something that could not be measured in weight or value. The Egyptian officials and priests who witnessed these exchanges saw in them a purity, a beauty that went beyond material wealth. They felt honored, touched by a bond that, in the eyes of Egypt, brought them both closer to the gods. The Egyptians knew that these people had their own beliefs, their own sacred rites, and yet they shared a reverence for life and for the land that felt familiar, almost as if it were the same spirit guiding them both. The Puntites lived in harmony with their world, honoring their gods, cherishing their land, protecting their people. They spoke of wisdom passed down through generations, of traditions that held the community together, of a respect for the land that the Egyptians admired deeply. And as they spoke, the Egyptians listened, taking in their words, feeling as if they were hearing an echo of something that Egypt itself had known long ago. The Puntites were not just people of trade, they were people of grace, of knowledge, of deep compassion. They looked upon the Egyptians not as foreigners or invaders, but as friends who had come to share in the beauty of the world. In this, they showed a wisdom that touched the Egyptians' hearts. They understood that true wealth lay not in conquest, but in harmony, in balance, in a respect for life that transcended borders. And so, the two peoples shared stories, shared hopes, shared dreams. They laughed together, worked together, and when they parted, they did so as equals, knowing that though they were separated by land and sea, they were bound by something much greater. For the Egyptians, the people of Punt were not only allies but a mirror, a reflection of the noblest parts of themselves. In the calm of the Puntites, the Egyptians saw strength, in their simplicity, they saw wisdom, in their kindness, they saw honor. They felt that the people of Punt held a secret, an understanding of the world that came not from power but from peace. To touch their hands was to touch the hands of friends, of kin, of equals. And as they turned back toward Egypt, carrying the scents of myrrh and frankincense, the weight of ivory and ebony, they carried also the warmth and memory of the people of Punt, a people who had become to them like family. A distant sun rose over the Egyptian horizon, casting golden light on the temple walls etched with the story of a queen's dream, a vision that carried her beyond her land, beyond the Nile, to a place whispered about but barely seen. Queen Hatshepsut, one of Egypt's few and most powerful female rulers, had set her sights on Punt, a land fabled in stories, filled with treasures and mysteries as old as Egypt itself. The desire to reach Punt was not simply about trade, it was about fulfilling a vision that seemed to pulse with divine purpose, as if the gods themselves had whispered this journey into her soul. In Hatshepsut's temple, vivid reliefs captured the details of her legendary expedition, the ships, heavy with supplies and gifts, the oars slicing through the Red Sea, the faces of her crew filled with a mixture of awe and apprehension. This was no ordinary voyage. Every sail raised, every wave crossed was a step towards something otherworldly. She believed that the gods had blessed this mission, weaving their will into each moment of the journey. And her people believed it too, seeing in her a pharaoh who walked closely with the divine, one whose ambitions were greater than the boundaries of Egypt itself. The reliefs showed her fleet, a procession of grand ships with high prows and sails filled with wind. To the Egyptians, these ships were not mere vessels, they were symbols of bravery and endurance, each wave a test of their commitment to the queen's vision. Carved onto the temple walls, they appear like timeless sentinels, pushing toward a goal that no one had reached with certainty before. Every Egyptian who gazed upon these carvings could almost feel the salty air, hear the creak of wood, and smell the scent of incense stored in the hold. They could feel, through those carvings, the pulse of their queen's dream. When they arrived on Punt's shore, they were met with a land so abundant it felt like a gift directly from the gods. Hatshepsut's men stepped onto the strange soil, their eyes wide at the sight before them. Tall, lush trees rose up from the ground, some bearing branches that dripped with the precious myrrh resin they had come so far to find. The air was thick with a rich, earthy scent, mingling with the aromas of unknown flowers and spices. And there, amidst this lush world, were the people of Punt, who stood with quiet dignity, welcoming their visitors from across the sea. The reliefs showed the exchanges between Egypt and Punt not as transactions, but as moments filled with honor and respect. Egypt had sent its queen's finest gifts, linens, finely woven and soft as silk, and necklaces crafted from precious stones. In return, the Puntites offered gifts of their own, including myrrh trees, their roots carefully preserved in baskets of earth. To carry back not just the resin but the trees themselves, the very source, was beyond the Egyptians' wildest expectations. It was a gesture of generosity and trust, as if the people of Punt had blessed them with a piece of their sacred land. Through these depictions, Hatshepsut's journey became something of a legend in her own time, taking on a glow of myth and wonder. Her expedition was a tribute to her strength as a leader, her determination to bring something miraculous back to Egypt. But it was more than that. Her journey was portrayed as a quest blessed by the gods, as if she had been guided by their invisible hands to bridge the worlds of Egypt and Punt. She had dared to set sail for this unknown place and had returned, triumphant and touched by the divine. And when her people heard of the wonders brought back from Punt, they saw more than just treasures, they saw proof of their queen's closeness to the gods, of her ability to make the impossible real. The scent of myrrh filled the temples, drifting in smoky curls that rose like prayers, each wisp a reminder of Hatshepsut's journey to a land so rich, so extraordinary, it felt like something out of a dream. And as the incense lingered in the air, the people of Egypt felt that perhaps they too had touched a piece of that distant, blessed land. They called it the land of the gods, a place whispered about with reverence, a place that felt more like a memory carried in the hearts of the Egyptian people than a destination. In their sacred myths, Punt was woven into the origins of their gods, a land so blessed that it seemed to exist on the border of the heavens. For many, Punt was not just a distant land, it was a cradle of the divine, a place that somehow felt like home to gods and men alike. Stories passed down through generations told of Hathor, the radiant goddess of love, music, and beauty, and of Bes, the fierce yet protective god with a wide smile and a lion's mane. Hathor was sometimes called the mistress of Punt, and her beauty was said to mirror the lush, untamed abundance of the land itself. To the Egyptians, Hathor was not just a goddess, she was joy, motherhood, music, and healing, the warmth of the sun as it rose over the Nile. In their temples, statues of Hathor smiled softly, her gaze seeming to look past the present and into a realm where gods and mortals walked together. And when they spoke of her origins, they looked toward Punt, a place of purity, beauty, and life that they could only dream of touching. To believe that Hathor came from Punt was to believe that Punt held within it a power that could heal, that could restore. It was as if the land itself was imbued with the essence of the goddess, a place where the very air held her spirit, where her laughter could be heard in the breeze that swept through the myrrh trees. Egyptian priests would speak of her as though she were a gift sent from that distant shore, a reminder of a world untouched by time, a place where joy was born. In this way, Punt became more than a place, it became a part of the soul, a reflection of beauty and peace that was both distant and deeply felt. Bes, too, was said to have ties to this land. Small in stature but mighty in spirit, Bes was the god who protected the home, who warded off evil, who made children laugh and chased away fear. His wide grin, wild hair, and fearless gaze spoke of a power that was both comforting and fierce. To invoke Bes was to feel protected, to feel that no matter what darkness lay ahead, there was light, laughter, and strength. In the myths, he came from Punt, a place where the land itself seemed to radiate his courage, his joy. Egyptian households kept his image close, carving his likeness into amulets and walls, bringing a piece of Punt's bravery and protection into their homes. To the Egyptians, the idea that their gods came from Punt made the land almost sacred, a place that was as near to paradise as they could imagine. It was said that in Punt, gods and humans could walk together, that the boundaries between the earthly and the divine were thin, like mist rising from a river at dawn. Punt was the place where divinity touched the earth, where the sacred was as natural as the trees, the rivers, and the stars. And this made it feel like an Eden, a place untouched, unmarred, pure in its beauty and its mystery. In every incense offering that burned in the temples, in the wafting smoke of myrrh and frankincense, there was a piece of Punt. Egyptians would close their eyes and inhale, feeling, if only for a moment, as though they were touching the edges of this divine land. The scent was both earthy and otherworldly, rich and full, as if it carried with it the memory of Punt's sacred groves, where Hathor and Bes and perhaps other gods walked in silence, blessing the earth with their presence. The land of Punt became a vision in their minds, a place as sacred as the gods themselves, a place where life flourished with a quiet beauty that no other land could claim. To speak of Punt was to speak of hope, of something eternal and untouched, a reminder that somewhere, beyond the reach of everyday life, lay a place where gods and humans could meet under a sky unmarred by sorrow, where each breath was a gift and each step a blessing. Through these stories, Punt lived on in Egypt's heart, a place woven with the divine, rich with beauty, blessed beyond measure, a memory of something holy that stayed, like a whisper, with the Egyptian people. In the hazy glow of dawn, the land of Punt seemed to shimmer, as if dusted by a spell woven into the very soil. Stories tell of a place where magic was as natural as breath, where the people lived not only by the light of the sun but by the light of secrets and sacred words. Rituals were not just ceremonies, they were pathways to connect with something far beyond ordinary life. To the Egyptians, Punt held the promise of mystery and knowledge, of oracles who could see past the veil of the present and into what lay hidden ahead. It was a land where words, spoken in prayer and chant, could open doors to the unknown. The people of Punt, with their own ancient customs, were thought to understand a language that connected them to the divine. Egyptian priests, who had only heard whispers of these rites, imagined the potent rituals performed in the depths of Punt's sacred groves. There, beneath the canopy of trees heavy with myrrh and incense, the air itself was thick with power. It was said that when they spoke, their voices carried like music through the trees, and that each word held a spark of magic, a connection to gods who listened from the unseen. In Egypt, legends spoke of Punt's holy places, secret enclaves where prophecies drifted like wind over water. To enter these places was to walk between worlds, as if the earth in Punt was a bridge that connected humanity to something more profound. Perhaps the priests would mark the earth with sacred symbols, etch circles with stones and paint the ground with the essence of myrrh, believing these would call down spirits from realms beyond. It was said that oracles in Punt were not merely people, they were conduits, voices through which the gods spoke directly, revealing visions and foretelling the paths of fate. Those who sought them were blessed, or perhaps warned, by words as ancient as the stones beneath their feet. One tale whispered along the Nile told of a figure from Punt, a seer whose eyes could see beyond mortal sight. Her gaze, it was said, held the colors of the desert and the Nile, as if she could peer straight into the heart of life itself. Those who saw her face did so in visions, catching only fleeting glimpses. But for the Egyptians, her image lingered as a shadow on the edge of dreams, and they believed she was someone who could speak directly to the gods, who understood the fabric of destiny as a weaver knows the threads of her cloth. What rites were held to honor these gifts? What words, what songs, what offerings? Egyptians dreamed that the people of Punt knew spells that could summon both protection and prophecy, that could bind harm and invite healing. They envisioned scenes of ritual fires flickering under starlit skies, casting shadows that danced like spirits, as if the flames themselves held voices from beyond. It was said that at certain times of the year, they would gather under the dark, silent expanse of night, each heart beating in rhythm with a drum, each voice rising in a harmony that called the divine closer, inviting the presence of gods who were bound to the land itself. The smoke from these rites was more than fragrance, it was a prayer, a lifeline. Egyptians imagined how the Puntites offered myrrh and frankincense with reverent hands, lifting them as if they were giving their hearts to the heavens. With each wisp of smoke that rose into the night, there was a belief that their pleas, their words, their very souls were carried upward, drifting toward realms unknown. There, beneath stars older than any temple stone, magic was not something to be summoned, it was part of every heartbeat, every breath, and every step on that hallowed ground. And somewhere in that mysterious land, it was thought that oracles sat quietly, waiting, listening to the voices that only they could hear. To approach them was to take a step into the unknown, to confront something far greater than oneself. Their prophecies were not always clear, but their words, spoken in whispers, carried a weight, a meaning that lingered long after they had faded into silence. These oracles could see through the present into something larger, a tapestry of fate and fortune woven across the ages. To the Egyptians, Punt was a place where magic was as ancient as the gods, where humans and spirits spoke as one, where time and space bent to the will of those who truly knew. The oracles, the chants, the rites, all of it made Punt not just a place on a map but a land that was itself a living, breathing mystery. There was something almost otherworldly about the landscape of Punt. The tales speak of rivers that shimmered under the sun like liquid gold, winding through dense, ancient forests. Mountains towered in the distance, their peaks lost in the clouds, as if reaching toward a sky where the gods themselves might walk. But it was not just the land that drew the Egyptians' awe, it was the life that thrived there. Sacred trees, heavy with the weight of incense and myrrh, rose like pillars of divine favor, their roots plunging into the earth as though they were connecting the heavens and the underworld. These trees were not merely plants, they were living symbols of the very heartbeat of the world, tied to the gods, to life, to healing. The Egyptians, with their hearts filled with wonder, imagined that the rivers of Punt were no mere bodies of water. These were sacred currents that carried the blessings of the gods, flowing through the land with a quiet power. As the Nile nourished Egypt, the rivers of Punt were believed to nourish the spirit, to cleanse and purify all who drank from them. The water was said to possess a rare quality, able to heal the sick and restore the weary. In their minds, the rivers of Punt were the veins of a divine body, carrying life-giving energy from the gods themselves. But it was the trees, those towering incense and myrrh trees, that captured the imagination of the Egyptians the most. To them, these trees were the physical manifestation of the divine, an offering from the earth that reached into the sky. The smell of myrrh and incense, thick and rich, was said to carry the very breath of the gods. When Egyptians first encountered these sacred trees, they didn't just see them as sources of wealth and trade, they saw them as living, breathing symbols of divine favor, a connection between the mortal world and the realm of the gods. The myrrh trees, with their gnarled bark and fragrant resin, were believed to be the guardians of life and healing. The resin they produced was precious, so precious that it became a symbol of the eternal. Myrrh was used in Egyptian temples for sacred rituals, its smoke rising like a prayer to the gods. It was said to have the power to cleanse the spirit, to carry the words of prayer to the heavens, and to bring blessings to those who used it. The people of Punt, in their sacred groves, would have seen these trees as more than just trees. They would have seen them as living beings, connected to the gods, providing not only wealth and material goods but also spiritual sustenance. In Egypt, the incense trees were no less revered. The smoke from their fragrant wood was believed to carry prayers and petitions to the gods. The ancient Egyptians imagined that the very act of burning incense could summon the divine presence, enveloping temples in a cloud of holiness. It was as if the trees themselves were guardians of divine will, there would holding the power to connect mortals with the sacred. Each swirl of incense smoke was like a messenger sent to the heavens, carrying the hopes and dreams of the people. These sacred elements of Punt, the rivers, the trees, were not just natural wonders. They were the heart of the myths that defined the Egyptian worldview. The landscape of Punt was woven into the fabric of their stories, shaping their understanding of the gods and the world. The incense and myrrh trees were not only symbols of life and healing, they were bridges between the earthly and the divine, connecting the human world to the sacred. The mountains of Punt, too, held their own place in Egyptian imagination. Towering and mysterious, these peaks were often shrouded in mist and mystery. They were seen as the homes of the gods, distant and unreachable, far beyond the reach of ordinary men. In the Egyptian mind, the mountains of Punt were not just physical places but spiritual realms where the divine resided, where the secrets of the universe were kept hidden, waiting for the worthy to discover them. To imagine these mountains was to imagine a place of infinite wisdom, a place where the gods could retreat when they needed to be alone, a place where no mortal could tread without the blessing of the divine. For the Egyptians, every element of the landscape of Punt spoke of something greater, of life, of healing, of divine connection. The rivers were not just water, they were the lifeblood of the gods, carrying their essence across the land. The trees were not just trees, they were living symbols of the divine, offering gifts of incense and myrrh that carried the prayers of the people to the heavens. The mountains were not just peaks of stone, they were the seats of the gods, places of mystery and power, places that could only be approached by those worthy enough to seek their wisdom. And so, the landscape of Punt became more than just a distant land. It became a place of wonder, a place of divine beauty and mystery, where every river, every tree, and every mountain was part of a greater whole, a sacred connection between the earth and the heavens, between the gods and humanity. The people of Egypt dreamed of this land, not just as a place of wealth, but as a land blessed by the gods, a land where the divine breathed life into the very soil, the very air. In the temples of Egypt, where stone walls echoed with the whispers of the divine, there was a belief that the land of Punt was a place where heaven and earth met. It wasn't just a faraway land, it was a spiritual paradise. The gods themselves had blessed this land, and its abundance, its treasures, its sacred trees, its rivers that seemed to carry the breath of the divine, was seen as a reflection of the gods' favor. To the priests and royalty of Egypt, Punt was more than just a source of wealth, it was a vision of what the world could be when touched by the gods. It was a place that represented purity, abundance, and spiritual perfection. The air was thick with divine power, and the ground itself seemed to hum with sacred energy. Every Egyptian temple, whether grand or small, held echoes of Punt. The incense and myrrh that flowed from Punt's sacred trees were burned in these temples, their smoke rising like prayers to the heavens. The scent filled the air, soothing and spiritual, as though the gods themselves were being summoned with each burning twig. The priests, who performed the rituals with meticulous care, were well aware that the offerings of incense from Punt were not just gifts, they were channels for divine favor. They believed that the essence of the gods was carried in the smoke, that every breath taken within the temple walls was a moment of connection between mortals and the divine. The Egyptians believed that Punt's gifts were sacred, and so they treated them with reverence. The rare treasures, ebony, ivory, gold, were more than just valuable commodities. They were offerings to the gods, given in the hope of receiving their blessings. It wasn't just a matter of wealth, it was a matter of pleasing the gods. Every item brought back from Punt was imbued with the power of the divine. And for the priests, it wasn't only the material wealth that mattered, it was the sense of spiritual purity that came with these gifts. Punt was seen as a model of the kind of perfection Egypt sought to attain in its temples, its rituals, and its connection with the gods. The very idea of Punt, with its magical trees and sacred rivers, became a part of the Egyptian religious imagination. It was the place where the divine was most visible, where the gods could be found in every corner of the land. Egypt's temples became mirrors of this distant paradise, designed to reflect the beauty and divinity of Punt itself. The walls were adorned with carvings that depicted the rare creatures and treasures of Punt, each image infused with a sense of awe and reverence. The divine aura of Punt was present in every stone, every carving, every offering. The priests, who lived to serve the gods, couldn't help but be enchanted by the vision of Punt as a place where the gods walked among the people. Even the rulers of Egypt, who held divine power on earth, found themselves drawn to Punt. Queen Hatshepsut, in particular, set out to claim this land as a symbol of her own divine favor. Her expedition to Punt wasn't just a diplomatic or trade mission, it was a spiritual quest. The records of this expedition, carved into the walls of her temple, tell of a land where the divine flowed like water, where every tree was a sign of the gods' favor, and where every breath of air carried the promise of eternal life. Hatshepsut's mission wasn't just a search for wealth, it was a search for a deeper connection to the divine, for a touch of that purity and perfection that Punt represented. The idea that she had traveled to the land of the gods and returned with sacred gifts for Egypt only elevated her status as a ruler chosen by the gods. It's possible that the lure of Punt wasn't just material, it was spiritual. Egyptian priests and royalty may have viewed Punt as a place where the gods themselves could be touched, a land where the veil between the earthly and the divine was thin. The sacred trees that grew in Punt, the myrrh and incense that filled the air, the rare and exotic animals, they all symbolized a connection to something greater than the mortal world. The priests, who spent their lives in the service of the gods, may have longed to go there, to stand in the place where the gods themselves walked. There are even whispers in the ancient texts that hint at pilgrimages, spiritual journeys made to this sacred land. If Egypt was to be a land of gods, then surely Punt was the closest thing to heaven on earth. Some believe that the rituals performed in Egypt's temples were not just about appeasing the gods, they were about aligning Egypt with the divine order that Punt represented. The sacred incense, the precious treasures, the offerings of food and drink, these were not just symbols of respect. They were acts of reverence toward a land that was believed to hold the key to divine favor. The Egyptians might have seen themselves as caretakers of the god's earthly home, and Punt as a paradise that could be touched but never fully possessed. It's hard to imagine the longing that must have filled the hearts of those who imagined Punt. It wasn't just a land of wealth, but a land of spiritual purity. A place where every tree was sacred, where the rivers whispered the names of the gods, where every breeze carried a promise of peace. The idea of Punt in the hearts of the Egyptian people wasn't just a hope, it was a vision of a perfect, divine world, a world where gods walked among men, where the divine and mortal realms were one. The thought of it must have been intoxicating, and for those who lived their lives in the shadow of Egypt's temples, it would have been the ultimate dream, a land that was as close to heaven as one could get. Punt, with its mystical beauty and divine gifts, became more than just a place. It became a symbol of Egypt's highest ideals, purity, abundance, and spiritual power. For the Egyptians, it was the land of gods, a paradise that they could only touch in their dreams. The pharaoh stood on the edge of the Great Nile, staring out across the river that had sustained Egypt for millennia. In the silence, there was a whisper in the wind, a whisper that spoke of a land far beyond the horizon. A land of mystery and untold riches. A land where gods walked among men. To the pharaohs who ruled Egypt, this was more than just a distant dream. It was a living, breathing part of their legacy, a legacy intertwined with the land of Punt. Thutmose III, one of Egypt's most powerful rulers, was captivated by Punt. His name became synonymous with military success and expansion, but it was his connection to this distant land that spoke volumes about his ambitions. Thutmose's journey to Punt was not just a military conquest, it was a spiritual mission, an effort to secure the divine favor of the gods for his kingdom. The riches he returned with, the incense, the exotic animals, the myrrh, all carried with them the weight of divine blessing. He believed that through his connection with Punt, Egypt would grow even more powerful, its gods more pleased. Every offering from Punt was like a prayer answered, a covenant sealed with the gods themselves. Thutmose's desire was to ensure that Egypt, the land he ruled with divine authority, would continue to thrive by holding the favor of the gods. But it wasn't just the pharaohs who felt the call of Punt. The high priests of Egypt, those who lived in the sacred precincts of the temples and were entrusted with keeping the connection to the divine alive, also felt the pull of this mysterious land. They were the keepers of knowledge of rituals, of secrets, of the gods. And some believed that they knew more about Punt than they let on. The high priests who stood in the grand temples of Karnak or Luxor could speak of Punt not just as a distant land but as a place of power. They were the ones who interpreted the will of the gods, who knew the sacred mysteries, and perhaps they understood that Punt was the key to Egypt's divine connection. The priests saw themselves as conduits for the divine. It was through their prayers, their offerings, their rituals, that Egypt could continue to thrive. They were the ones who understood the deeper meaning behind the incense and myrrh, the sacred trees, the rivers that whispered the names of the gods. The priests understood that Punt wasn't just a land, it was a living representation of the divine. And perhaps, just perhaps, they had a greater understanding of Punt's significance than even the pharaohs did. The pharaohs sought Punt for its wealth, for its resources, but the priests might have seen it as something much deeper, an eternal connection to the gods themselves. They knew that the secrets of Punt were tied to the very spiritual fabric of Egypt. Ramses II, a pharaoh whose name is still whispered in awe across the millennia, also recognized the significance of Punt. The grandeur of his reign was marked not just by military victories but by his understanding of Egypt's spiritual needs. Ramses built temples that celebrated the gods and the divine order they upheld. And among the gods, Punt held a special place. Ramses, like Thutmose III before him, understood the sacred role that Punt played in the Egyptian worldview. He knew that Punt was not just a source of wealth, it was a symbol of divine blessing, a sacred land that could elevate Egypt in the eyes of the gods. The high priests who served under Ramses would have been charged with safeguarding that divine connection. They would have carried the knowledge of Punt's mystical influence, passing down the stories of the land where gods and men mingled. These priests were more than just religious leaders, they were the spiritual guardians of Egypt's future. They shaped the rituals, the ceremonies, the offerings that kept Egypt in the favor of the gods. And perhaps, hidden within the sacred scrolls and the walls of the temples, were the deeper, more enigmatic truths about Punt. The pharaohs, with their divine right to rule, understood the importance of maintaining this connection to the divine. But they also knew that they were not the only ones who could carry Egypt's legacy forward. The priests, with their deep knowledge of the sacred, played an equally vital role in sustaining Egypt's spiritual power. They were the ones who kept the ancient knowledge alive, who interpreted the omens, the signs from the gods. And if Punt was the key to divine favor, the priests were the ones who understood how to unlock its mysteries. For the pharaohs, the allure of Punt was not just about expanding Egypt's borders or bringing back treasure. It was about securing the future of Egypt itself, about ensuring that the gods looked upon their land with favor. For the priests, Punt was the living embodiment of the divine connection they maintained with the gods. It was a place that offered not only wealth but the promise of spiritual fulfillment. Through Punt, Egypt's rulers could ensure that their legacy would be eternal. And through the priests, Egypt's divine knowledge would remain protected, passed down through the generations, guarding the sacred bond between Egypt and the gods. In the grand halls of the temples, surrounded by towering statues and the scent of incense, the pharaohs and priests understood that Punt was more than just a myth. It was the embodiment of Egypt's greatest hopes, its connection to the divine, its wealth, its future. It was a land that represented all that was sacred, all that was pure. And it was the pharaohs and priests who, through their reverence and their knowledge, ensured that the secrets of Punt would never fade. As long as Egypt stood, Punt would live in its heart, a symbol of the divine favor that had shaped its past and would shape its future. The wind howled through the desert sands, carrying whispers of a time long past, when a powerful queen ruled over a land bathed in the glow of divine favor. Her name is lost to history, but the memory of her power, her majesty, and the treasures of her kingdom still echo in the halls of Egypt's temples. It is a queen who stands as a figure in the shadows, half myth, half reality, her legacy intertwined with the very gods themselves. When Queen Hatshepsut embarked on her legendary expedition to Punt, she encountered a figure whose very existence was woven with divine mystery. This queen, who ruled over the land of Punt, was no mere mortal. The Egyptians described her as a powerful woman, regal in her bearing, with a command that suggested she held sway over both the heavens and the earth. Her palace must have been a sight to behold, perched atop a landscape of sacred rivers and towering mountains. From the reliefs on the walls of Hatshepsut's temple at Deir el-Bahari, we catch a glimpse of this queen, an enigmatic figure whose face is half hidden by the veil of time, her presence commanding respect from every direction. In the Egyptian view, this queen was more than just a ruler. To them, she was almost a goddess in her own right, a living embodiment of the land's sacred power. Her bearing and grace must have been otherworldly, as if she had been touched by the divine. Hatshepsut, with her own claim to divine lineage, saw in this queen a kindred spirit. Both women were rulers who navigated the complexities of power, divine favor, and their own places in history. But where Hatshepsut sought to elevate Egypt through political and spiritual feats, the Queen of Punt had already achieved a unique mastery, blending politics and divine will in such a way that her very rule seemed to transcend mortal concerns. This queen's reign was not just about riches, though Punt was undeniably a land of wealth. The treasures that the Egyptians sought, myrrh, incense, ivory, were sacred offerings in the grand rituals of their gods. These were not just goods to be bartered for, they were powerful symbols, gateways to divine favor. It is said that the queen ruled over a land where the sacred trees of myrrh and frankincense grew, their resin like liquid gold, essential to the worship of Egypt's gods. The very landscape of Punt, from the rivers to the mountains, had a mystical aura that seemed to bend nature's laws, as if the land itself was a living shrine. How could a mere ruler control such a realm, where every tree, every stone, every drop of water was so deeply infused with the sacred? Perhaps the queen was no ordinary ruler. In the myths surrounding her, she was both powerful and divine, a being who could bridge the gap between mortals and the gods. Egyptian priests might have looked upon her as a figure who could communicate with the gods directly, a queen who could move between the worlds of men and spirits with ease. Her name, though lost to history, is still remembered in the very artifacts she sent to Egypt, in the incense that wafted through the temple corridors, in the exotic animals that thrilled the pharaoh's court. Some say that she was more than just a ruler, she was a goddess in human form, a mortal vessel for the divine energy that flowed through her land. Her power must have been extraordinary, her influence far-reaching. If Punt was truly a land touched by the gods, then its ruler must have had the divine right to govern, to protect, and to nurture the spiritual essence of her people. She wasn't just the keeper of riches, she was the guardian of spiritual truths, of sacred practices that tied her people to the gods of Egypt, and to the gods of Punt themselves. The Queen of Punt must have been as much a spiritual leader as a political one. The power she wielded was not limited to the boundaries of her land. It was felt in Egypt, where the pharaohs and priests viewed Punt as a place where heaven and earth met. She was revered by the Egyptians, and perhaps feared as well, for her rule was tied to forces far greater than any mortal leader could comprehend. How could the rulers of Egypt resist her influence? They needed the sacred products she controlled. They needed the connection to the divine that Punt offered. Some may have viewed her as a rival to Egypt's own gods. She may have been seen as a figure whose power rivaled that of the pharaohs themselves. In the grand temples and royal courts, her name would have been spoken with a reverence and awe reserved for those who wielded true spiritual power. It was not just the goods she provided that made her important, it was the aura of mystery and divinity that surrounded her. For the people of Punt, she must have been a queen beyond compare, no ordinary ruler, but one who had a direct connection with the divine. Perhaps she was believed to be the embodiment of a goddess, walking among her people as a living incarnation of divine will. How else could a ruler preside over such a sacred land, where every river, mountain, and tree was suffused with the gods' favor? Her power may have been political, but it was also deeply spiritual. The rituals and ceremonies she conducted in her court must have been elaborate, full of mystery and wonder. Perhaps she held secrets, ancient knowledge passed down from the gods themselves. This knowledge may have been what gave her the power to keep Punt untouched by the chaos and wars that plagued other lands. She was not just a ruler, she was a keeper of a sacred truth, a truth that tied the land of Punt to the very heavens. In Egypt, she may have been mythologized, not just as a ruler of wealth but as a bridge between two worlds, the human and the divine. The very air in Punt was thick with the essence of the gods, and the queen must have walked with them, her every command imbued with divine authority. Her reign was more than a political arrangement, it was the embodiment of a divine order, a perfect harmony between the earth and the heavens, a queen who ruled both in body and spirit. Her story is not just one of wealth or political power. It is the story of a ruler who was as much a goddess as a queen, a figure whose legacy has transcended time itself. And though we may never know her true name, the Queen of Punt remains a figure whose influence continues to cast a long shadow, mysterious, powerful, and sacred. Her story lingers in the incense-scented air, in the precious artifacts she sent to Egypt, and in the myths that have lived on for millennia. A lone figure stands at the edge of a vast desert, eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun sets in a fiery blaze of gold and crimson. Behind him stretches the lifeline of the Nile, the river that has carried generations of Egypt's finest on journeys of power and discovery. Before him, the land of Punt, mythical, elusive, a place of divine wonders, calls. What would it have been like for those heroes of old, the explorers who dared to set foot into this fabled world? Who were they, and what did they find there? The stories of these explorers are etched in the whispers of time. They are more than just adventurers, they are legends in their own right, figures of awe who left their mark on both the land they came from and the mysterious world they sought to uncover. The journey to Punt was no mere trek across desert sands or uncharted seas. It was a pilgrimage of the spirit, a quest where the very landscape seemed alive, pulsing with the power of the gods. Every step toward Punt was a step into the unknown, a place where magic wasn't just a story, it was real. One can only imagine the courage it took to embark on such an adventure, to sail across the Red Sea, navigating treacherous waters, facing the endless expanse of the desert, all for a land that might be nothing more than a dream. And yet, the explorers of Punt were not deterred. With every wave they crossed, every storm they weathered, they ventured forward into the unknown, believing in the legends, driven by a need to touch the divine. They had heard the stories, the incense trees, the gold, the exotic animals, the very scent of heaven itself. They must have been men of exceptional bravery, guided by a force stronger than simple ambition, as if they knew that their journey was written in the stars. Imagine standing at the threshold of Punt. The air is thick with the scent of myrrh and frankincense, the very air you breathe feels sacred. There, amid the towering trees of incense and the sweet fragrance of the land, they may have encountered something otherworldly. Perhaps the first explorers to set foot there did not just return with riches but with something far more valuable, knowledge, wisdom, and stories that would echo through Egypt for centuries. Did they speak of divine encounters, of gods walking among them in the shimmering light? Were they blessed by the gods with visions of ancient truths, or did the very land of Punt hold the secrets of the universe? What could they have seen? Perhaps towering mountains shrouded in mist, their peaks disappearing into the sky. Rivers flowing with water so pure it seemed as if it came directly from the gods. Sacred animals, giraffes with their graceful necks, baboons dancing in the moonlight, creatures that were so fantastical, so alien to the Egyptians, that they were forever immortalized in the art and stories of the time. Every step they took, each new sight, would have seemed like a blessing, a moment of divine connection. And what of the explorers themselves? Were they transformed by their encounters in Punt? It said that the priests of Egypt believed the land to be a direct conduit to the divine. They must have felt that the land itself was imbued with a kind of sacred magic, and those who ventured there were not just bringing back treasures, but also carrying with them pieces of a divine world. The explorers of Punt were heroes in every sense. They risked everything for a land of unimaginable beauty and power. They were, in many ways, the embodiment of the mythic quests of old. These explorers did not simply come back with gold and ivory. They brought with them the stories, the visions, and the influence of Punt itself. Perhaps they returned with tales so vivid, so strange, that the people of Egypt could not help but believe in the magic of this far-off land. The descriptions of Punt, its sacred trees, its divine rivers, its mythical creatures, these were not just embellishments but echoes of a world that existed on the very edge of reality. The stories of Punt wove themselves into the fabric of Egyptian culture, influencing religion, spirituality, and even daily life. Punt became something greater than a geographical location. It became a symbol, a metaphor for the divine, a place where the human and the sacred met. As the years passed, these explorers' tales would become myths in their own right, each generation adding their own layers of wonder to the story of Punt. The heroes who journeyed there became figures of legend, their adventures growing in stature until they were no longer just men, but demigods, touched by the divine. The lines between history and myth began to blur, and soon, the journeys to Punt were seen as more than just expeditions. They were quests of spiritual significance, journeys taken not just to find wealth, but to commune with the gods themselves. Punt began to take on a life of its own in the collective imagination of Egypt. The explorers who returned became symbols of divine favor. They were the ones who had touched the gods, who had walked on sacred ground. And as their stories were told and retold, they grew richer, more fantastical. Perhaps in time, the priests of Egypt began to believe that only the purest of souls could venture into Punt. Only the most favored could undertake such a journey, and in doing so, they would be transformed, elevated to a higher state of spiritual awareness, granted insight into the mysteries of life and death. The cultural exchange between Egypt and Punt must have been profound. The wealth that came from Punt, the myrrh, the incense, the ivory, was not just material. It carried with it the essence of the land, the sacred power of the trees and rivers. The stories and rituals of Punt would have flowed into Egypt, influencing the religion, the ceremonies, and the very way the Egyptians viewed their gods. Punt was more than just a place, it was a symbol of divine connection, a land where the earthly and the divine coexisted in perfect harmony. The explorers' influence didn't just stop with the goods they brought back. The very concept of Punt itself, its magic, its holiness, became interwoven into Egyptian religion. It inspired temples, rituals, and sacred texts. It became a part of the Egyptian spiritual consciousness, a place that was both real and mythic, both a destination and a dream. As the explorers returned with their tales of divine encounters and magical landscapes, they became part of something larger than themselves. Their journeys weren't just about discovering a land. They were about discovering something within themselves, something divine, something eternal. They weren't just adventurers, they were seekers of the divine, each one a hero who ventured into the unknown to find a truth that transcended the mortal world. And in their return, they gave Egypt a gift more valuable than all the riches of Punt, the belief that the divine could be touched, that the gods could be reached, that magic was real, and it was waiting just beyond the horizon. The air is thick with anticipation. A group of modern-day explorers stands at the edge of a dry desert, their eyes fixed on the barren landscape, but their minds racing with visions of the past. Somewhere beneath their feet lies a land that has haunted the dreams of humankind for millennia, Punt. A place where gods walked, where incense trees towered like ancient sentinels, and where mysteries beyond comprehension once flourished. The ancient Egyptians spoke of Punt in whispers, wrapped in layers of myth and reverence, but even today, its exact location is a question that still drives archaeologists to the edges of the earth. Every time a new expedition sets out in search of Punt, it feels like the beginning of a new chapter in an ancient story, one that has captivated generations. Modern archaeologists stand where countless others have stood before them, but they are armed with something that the explorers of old never had: technology. Satellites scan the Earth from the heavens above, while ground-penetrating radar gives them the ability to see through layers of time, uncovering secrets buried deep beneath the surface. Yet despite these advances, the land of Punt remains as elusive as it did thousands of years ago, slipping away like sand between the fingers of those who seek it. The clues are tantalizing. In the deserts of Egypt and Sudan, traces of ancient trade routes emerge, leading researchers to believe that the path to Punt was once known, even if the final destination remains hidden. Egyptian artifacts have been found in remote locations, pieces of a puzzle that seem to suggest that Punt was a real place, its treasures flowing into the great temples of Egypt. But even with these finds, there is nothing that can definitively place Punt on the map. As the sun begins to set on one expedition after another, the feeling that haunts these archaeologists is palpable, the thrill of discovery, but also the bitter sting of frustration. For every step forward, it feels like they take 2 steps back. They find artifacts, yes, vases, beads, fragments of ancient wood, but nothing that proves they have reached the land that the Egyptians spoke of in such reverent tones. These fragments are like whispers from the past, suggesting that Punt existed but offering no solid proof of where it was. In the heart of the modern search, there is a deep connection to the past. The very land the archaeologists tread on is imbued with a history so old it makes the ground beneath their feet seem alive with memory. Every stone, every grain of sand holds the potential for revelation, and yet each discovery brings with it the haunting realization that the final answer may forever remain out of reach. Is this what the ancient explorers felt when they set out for Punt, knowing they were in pursuit of something sacred, something impossible to fully understand? In the search for Punt, technology has opened new doors, but it hasn't unlocked every mystery. The satellite images that map ancient trade routes and possible coastlines are marvels of modern science, yet they do not provide the clear answer everyone is hoping for. The radar scans that pulse through the Earth, revealing buried structures and remnants of ancient civilizations, are like flashes of light in a stormy sea, distant, unclear, always out of reach. Every find is a promise, yet the pieces don't seem to fit together in the way the researchers had hoped. One of the most frustrating elements of the hunt is that Punt might not even be a single place. Could it have been more of an idea than a fixed location? Was it a place that existed not just in the physical world, but in the imaginations of those who sought it? The Egyptians believed Punt to be the perfect land, the source of all things pure and divine. To them, it was a paradise, and perhaps, in some ways, the search for it is as much about chasing a vision as it is about chasing a real geographical location. The treasures, the incense, the divine animals, these were not just riches, they were symbols of something greater. The heart of Punt, if it ever existed, may have been not just a place but a feeling, a spiritual realm. The expeditions are filled with moments of deep reflection, where the line between past and present seems to blur. When an archaeologist finds a fragment of pottery or a carved stone that hints at an ancient connection to Punt, there's a sense that they are standing on the precipice of something monumental. But just as quickly, the discovery slips away, leaving only questions behind. There are days of frustration, when nothing is found, and nights filled with quiet contemplation. How much longer can this search continue? Will Punt ever be found, or will it remain a myth, a legend that transcends time? Yet, there is always hope. The explorers of today are not unlike the adventurers of old, each one driven by a sense of purpose, a need to uncover what lies hidden beneath the layers of history. The idea of Punt is too powerful to let go, and even as modern methods continue to fall short, the desire to find this place of legend burns as bright as it did in the time of the pharaohs. One of the most powerful aspects of the search for Punt is the connection between the ancient world and the modern one. The same land that once held the incense trees of legend still holds the secrets of the past. The explorers who journeyed to Punt centuries ago are not forgotten, their stories live on in the hearts of those who follow in their footsteps today. The quest for Punt is more than just about archaeology, it's about reconnecting with something ancient, something sacred. It's about reaching into the past, hoping that, in doing so, we can bring the past into the present. As the expeditions continue, the question lingers, will Punt ever be found? The answer is elusive, yet the search itself carries a power all its own. Every new discovery, every new theory, adds to the tapestry of mystery that surrounds this ancient place. The land of Punt is no longer just a distant memory. It has become a symbol of something greater, of human curiosity, of the pursuit of knowledge, and of the longing to uncover what lies hidden in the past. In the end, the search for Punt may not just be about finding a location on a map. It may be about understanding why this place has haunted humanity for so long. The hunt for Punt is a quest for more than treasure, it is a search for meaning, for connection, for the belief that there is still magic left in the world. The fact that Punt remains elusive only makes it more powerful, more real in the hearts of those who seek it. And perhaps, in that mystery, we are all touched by something divine. The map of the world feels like a puzzle, with pieces scattered, yet the one that seems to slip through your fingers the most is Punt. Histories and legends, wrapped in a veil of mystery, suggest it was the land of the gods, a paradise where the finest treasures and spices bloomed under a sun of eternal grace. But where exactly was it? Modern theories stretch from the dry lands of Africa to the rocky coasts of Arabia, each proposing a different piece of the vast and enigmatic puzzle. Some say it lies in the heart of Somalia, where the rugged coastline meets the restless ocean. The land is steeped in beauty, yet harsh, a place where ancient peoples could have known the secrets of incense trees and magic. Others point to the fertile shores of Eritrea, where trade routes once crossed paths and the whispers of an ancient civilization might still echo through the hills. Even farther, across the Red Sea, some believe the answers rest in Yemen, its towering mountains and strange, wild plants offering a sense of otherworldliness. Each theory is brimming with possibility, as if every region that has claimed to be the land of Punt holds its own pieces of something untold, something sacred. In Somalia, there are those who argue that the land once known as Punt could be the key to understanding the early history of Africa. The coast is rich with natural resources, trees that could have easily produced the highly prized incense and myrrh. The sea, wild and unpredictable, could have once been a bustling trade route for the ancient Egyptians, who sailed across these waters to reach a land of untold treasures. It's a theory that seems to almost breathe life into the sandy shores, and for those who advocate it, there's something in the wind, the faint trace of a distant past, that makes the idea feel real. Then, there's Eritrea. With its ancient ruins and quiet, undisturbed beauty, it stands as a testament to civilizations that have long since faded. Some believe Punt's influence could have flowed from here, carried on the winds and seas to Egypt. The land, speckled with history, still holds the echoes of lost civilizations, as if the ground itself is waiting for someone to listen. The incense trees, the fragrant myrrh, the very air itself seems alive with the possibilities of what once could have been. Yemen, too, holds a unique place in the theories surrounding Punt. The country's mountains stand tall against the sky, ancient and proud. It's a land where both history and mystery intertwine, a place where divine encounters feel possible. The people of Yemen have long had a reputation for wisdom, and with its proximity to the trade routes of the ancient world, it could easily have been the home of the treasures that Egypt so coveted. The frankincense and myrrh, essences of life and divine favor, could have come from here, giving the land a mythic stature that resonates to this very day. But each of these locations, despite their own allure and convincing evidence, only brings us a little closer to the truth. The mystery deepens with every theory, growing more complex and harder to solve. As the search continues, doubts begin to creep in. What if Punt wasn't a physical place at all? What if it was never meant to be found on a map, but instead lived as a symbol? A symbolic land that represented more than just wealth and prosperity. A place of divine power, where the gods themselves walked among men, their gifts flowing like rivers into Egypt, forever nourishing the soul of a civilization. Maybe Punt was never a location in the traditional sense. Could it have been more than a mere geographical spot? Maybe it existed in the minds of those who sought it, a representation of what the world could be, ideal, untouched, and pure. A place that transcended physical boundaries, existing in the hearts of those who believed in its promise of eternal blessings. For those who saw Punt as a symbol, it became something much more than just a destination. It was a dream of a land where gods and men were one, where life itself was sacred and untouched by the turmoil of the world. Perhaps this is where the mystery of Punt truly lies, not in its physical location but in what it represented. The stories told about Punt speak of divine encounters, of landscapes that held the breath of gods, where sacred trees could heal and divine animals roamed. Could it be that Punt existed, not as a place, but as a reflection of something much larger, something beyond time and place? The theories themselves begin to blur into each other. Could the land of Punt have been an idea that moved with the people, taking on different forms depending on where one stood? To the Egyptians, it may have been the perfect paradise, something so extraordinary that it could never be fully understood by the human eye. And so, the search continues, circling ever closer to the heart of the mystery but never quite reaching it. In the end, Punt may always remain just beyond our grasp, like a dream fading as we wake. But the hunt for it, whether in the deserts of Africa, the coasts of Arabia, or even within the soul of Egypt itself, is a journey that carries with it the weight of human curiosity and yearning. For what is a myth, if not a reflection of our deepest desires? What is a legend, if not the story of our shared longing for something greater than ourselves? Maybe Punt wasn't just a land, it was an idea. A place to aspire to, a vision that never quite materialized, but whose memory will live on forever in the hearts of those who continue to search. Every theory, every piece of evidence, every whisper of history, only adds to the fire. And so, the search for Punt goes on, wherever it may be, whether in the sands of the earth or in the echoes of a mythic past. Each theory adds to the mystery, pulling us deeper into a story that has no end. The Egyptians, with their towering pyramids and timeless wonders, have always captured the world's imagination. But there's one part of their story that continues to linger in the shadows, a place so mysterious that it fueled legends for centuries. Punt. Its name is still whispered with awe, and the treasures it held have been immortalized in the annals of Egypt's grand history. Though the land itself remains elusive, its influence on the world, on Egypt, on trade, on culture, was undeniable. Punt was not just a far-off land, it was an essential part of Egypt's life, both spiritual and material. It was a symbol of wealth, abundance, and divine favor, where the gods themselves seemed to have touched the earth. For centuries, the ancient Egyptians reached out to this mystical land, bringing back goods that would ignite the world's fascination. In its mysterious bounty, Egypt found much more than trade, it found a connection to the divine. The treasures of Punt were as exotic as they were precious. The incense and myrrh that arrived in Egypt became the very essence of religious ritual and luxury. These were the scents of the gods, fragrant offerings to the divine, used in temples, ceremonies, and the royal courts. To the Egyptians, Punt was the birthplace of the rarest commodities, the source of everything that could elevate their society to new heights. The very idea that this land could hold such wonders stirred the hearts of those who sought it, pharaohs and traders alike. But beyond its material wealth, Punt played a crucial role in the cultural and spiritual outreach of Egypt. Its relationship with the land of the pharaohs reached beyond simple trade, it was a link to something greater. The land, whether real or mythic, became a symbol of Egypt's power and influence, a story passed down through generations that filled the minds of Egyptians with pride and wonder. It was as if Punt was the key to understanding the divine nature of Egypt itself, its rulers, and its people. The mystery of Punt created a ripple effect across the ancient world, sparking imaginations far beyond Egypt's borders. Even today, historians, archaeologists, and explorers continue to be drawn to the myth of Punt, trying to piece together its story. And though the land remains elusive, its impact is clear, Egypt's influence spread through its connection to this distant, mysterious place. Egypt's wealth, its divine favor, its very identity were all wrapped up in the idea of Punt. Through Punt, Egypt's trade network flourished. The goods that came from there, precious wood, rare stones, exotic animals, were treasures in the eyes of those who ruled the Nile. The pharaohs, eager to expand their kingdoms and solidify their rule, sent expeditions to Punt to bring back what was needed to elevate Egypt to the heights of greatness. Their ships carried not only the material wealth of the land but also the stories of Punt, of a place so divine that it could only be spoken of in whispers, so sacred that it seemed to exist beyond the physical world. Punt wasn't just an economic connection, it became a touchstone for Egypt's cultural identity. The pharaohs, in their quest for divine favor, sought to make these expeditions not just trips of trade, but sacred pilgrimages to a land that existed on the edge of reality. In bringing back the goods of Punt, Egypt solidified its reputation as a kingdom blessed by the gods. Through the exchange of goods and culture, Egypt's influence spread across ancient civilizations, from the kingdoms of Nubia to the shores of the Mediterranean. But Punt's mystery didn't just shape Egypt. It shaped the way the world viewed exploration and trade. The search for Punt became a story of ambition, of reaching out to lands unknown, of seeking the divine in distant corners of the earth. The idea that there was a land so rich, so powerful, and so blessed with favor inspired generations of explorers, traders, and dreamers. Even as Punt slipped further into legend, its impact on global exploration cannot be understated. In the broader scope of world history, Punt's connection to Egypt opened doors to new ways of thinking about the world. The exchange between Egypt and Punt was not just about material wealth, it was about knowledge, culture, and ideas. The goods that were traded, incense, ivory, gold, brought not only riches but also stories of distant lands, beliefs, and practices that blended with the Egyptian way of life. The cultural impact was just as significant as the economic one. The myths of Punt spread far beyond Egypt, reaching distant civilizations that began to see the world through the lens of Egypt's grandiosity. As Egypt's influence stretched outward, so did the idea of Punt as a land of paradise. The very notion that there was a place beyond the horizon that held the key to divine favor and prosperity sparked the imagination of countless civilizations. Traders, kings, and explorers all dreamed of finding their own Punt, a place where wealth, power, and spiritual enlightenment could be found in the same breath. The search for Punt, whether literal or metaphorical, became a symbol of humanity's longing for something greater, for a world beyond the ordinary, where the gods could be touched and the earth itself could be made holy. Punt's legacy is woven deeply into the fabric of Egypt's own story. It was a place that shaped Egypt's economy, culture, and spirituality, a land that symbolized the heights of divine favor and earthly glory. As the pharaohs sent their expeditions to Punt, they were not only expanding their borders but expanding the very idea of what it meant to be Egyptian. The goods that came back from Punt, exotic, rare, and divine, did more than fill the coffers of Egypt's rulers, they nourished the soul of the kingdom, creating a bond with a place that existed somewhere between myth and reality. The fascination with Punt continues to echo across the ages. It remains a symbol of the unknown, a place that captured the imagination of an entire civilization and continues to spark the curiosity of the world. Its influence on Egypt, and in turn the world, is a testament to the power of myths, the strength of trade, and the eternal human desire to reach beyond the known world in search of something greater. Punt, whether real or imagined, is forever intertwined with the legacy of Egypt. It continues to inspire awe, not just for the treasures it may have held, but for the way it shaped the course of history. It reminds us that sometimes the greatest mysteries are not just the ones we seek to solve, but the ones that continue to shape our dreams and ambitions long after they've faded from the earth. The ancient world has always been a stage for stories filled with wonder, mystery, and the unexplainable. One name echoes through time, a name that carries with it the heavy weight of legend and the sparkling allure of untold riches: Punt. It is a name that has haunted the minds of thinkers, artists, and explorers for centuries, a name that stirs something deep within us, the craving for discovery, for something hidden, for something lost to time but still shimmering in our imagination. Punt is not just a place, it is a symbol of the unknown. It has slipped in and out of the pages of history, sometimes a tangible land, other times a mystical mirage, always just out of reach. The very idea of Punt has shaped countless works of literature and art, feeding the minds of those who wish to find the lost pieces of ancient worlds. The allure of Punt has always been irresistible. Writers have woven it into the fabric of their tales, creating stories that echo with the mystery of faraway lands, rich with treasures and secrets. Ancient texts spoke of its divine nature, its precious gifts, and its spiritual significance. But as centuries passed, Punt's mystery only deepened. Writers, from the classical to the modern, have taken this void of certainty and filled it with their own imagination. They painted Punt as a paradise, a kingdom where the gods themselves walked, where riches flowed like rivers, and where magic was a common currency. But none could fully grasp what Punt truly was, and so it became more than a place, it became an idea. An idea that reflected humanity's deepest desires, the search for something greater, something more wondrous than the world they knew. Punt's influence on art has been just as profound. Artists, like ancient scribes, have used it as a symbol of beauty, a place where the imagination runs free, untouched by the limitations of reality. The pharaohs, in their desire to immortalize their grand expeditions, commissioned artists to carve vivid scenes of their journeys to Punt into temple walls. These depictions were not just of trade goods, they were symbols of divine favor, of a kingdom blessed by the gods. These works of art told stories of Egypt's grand connection to a far-off land of mystery, where incense trees, exotic animals, and precious stones flowed like a river of bounty. In modern times, Punt has continued to haunt the hearts of artists and filmmakers. The idea of a lost kingdom, hidden away in the folds of history, has become a powerful symbol in popular culture. Film directors have seized upon this idea, creating epic tales of daring explorers searching for the fabled land. In their hands, Punt has taken on new shapes, from the lush, green jungles to barren desert wastelands, but it always carries the same aura of wonder. It's a place where adventure awaits and the unknown calls to those brave enough to listen. It represents a longing that stirs the hearts of those who believe that there is always something more to be discovered, something just beyond the horizon. Even today, Punt has a place in our modern imaginations. It is a theme that pulses through books, movies, and TV shows. The mystery of a land so beautiful, so rich, and yet so elusive, has inspired many to dream of a world that exists beyond our own, a world where anything is possible, where magic and wonder still reign. Punt, like Atlantis or El Dorado, represents the ultimate quest, a journey into the unknown, where every step holds the promise of uncovering secrets and treasures beyond imagination. But it's not just the promise of riches that makes Punt so appealing. It's the promise of something deeper, the quest for understanding, the desire to touch the divine, to find a place where the earth and the heavens meet. Punt is the place where gods and mortals interacted, where the divine descended to the world of men. The Egyptians, with their complex pantheon and deep spiritual beliefs, saw Punt not just as a land of physical wealth, but as a spiritual sanctuary. The sacred incense trees and the myrrh that flowed from its soil were not just commodities, they were divine gifts, blessed by the gods themselves. This spiritual aura of Punt still colors its portrayal in literature and film today. It is a land that resonates with sacred energy, a place that exists outside of time and space, a liminal zone where the boundary between the mortal and the divine blurs. The symbolism of Punt is as much about the soul's longing for transcendence as it is about tangible treasures. In many works of fiction, Punt represents a final destination for those who seek ultimate knowledge, peace, or enlightenment, a mystical utopia, suspended in the timeless sands of myth. The mystery of Punt has also sparked philosophical questions, turning it into a symbol of humanity's eternal search for answers. Was it real? Or was it just an invention, a myth created to represent the unattainable? This question lingers in the hearts of those who study its history, as they search for traces of its existence in ancient texts and archaeological digs. The fact that Punt is still largely a mystery adds to its allure, and each new theory or discovery only adds layers to its complexity. Some argue that Punt was nothing more than a metaphor, a place created to embody the unreachable heights of human ambition. Others believe it was real, located somewhere in Africa, Arabia, or the Horn of Africa. But the ambiguity of its location only strengthens its power as a symbol. It is not meant to be found, it is meant to be dreamed of. Punt is more than just a place, it is a vision of what the world could be, a reflection of humanity's deepest desires for mystery, adventure, and divine connection. It holds a mirror up to our own yearnings for something more, something grander than the life we know. And so, the mystery of Punt lives on. It lingers in the pages of books, in the frames of films, in the brushstrokes of artists. It is a place that has shaped our imaginations, inspired our creativity, and touched our souls. Its magic lies not just in the possibility of finding it but in the way it has become a part of our collective story. The Lost Kingdom of Punt may never be found, but its legacy endures in the stories we tell, the art we create, and the dreams we dare to dream. Punt exists somewhere between the known and the unknown, a shimmering mirage that haunts the pages of history and the corners of our imagination. For centuries, it has been the object of fascination, a place both real and elusive, so tangible in its influence yet so impossibly distant. Was it a paradise, a land of untold riches and divine power, or was it merely a myth, a dream conjured by a people longing for something more? In the endless search for the truth, we are left to wonder, what is real about Punt, and what is the product of the stories woven by time? Its story tugs at the very core of human nature, a reminder of how we crave the unknown, how we yearn for answers to questions that may never be fully resolved. We can feel it, the pull of a place so grand and so mysterious that even the greatest minds cannot agree on its existence. Was it a kingdom of gold, full of wealth beyond comprehension, or was it an allegory, a reflection of the gods' power and a distant ideal we can never touch? What remains certain, however, is that Punt has always had the ability to transcend mere geography. Its allure is more than just the physical treasure it might have promised, it has become a symbol, a canvas on which people project their deepest desires. It represents the boundless limits of human imagination, a land where everything is possible. As long as the boundaries of history and geography cannot clearly define Punt, it remains free, a kingdom of possibility, where facts blur and dreams take shape. But within that blur, there is something else, an uncomfortable truth. The search for Punt, whether it is through the dusty pages of ancient texts or the careful sifting of soil on distant shores, reflects something deeper about humanity. We are always reaching beyond the horizon, searching for answers to the mysteries that elude us. Our greatest triumphs are often shaped by our ability to navigate the unknown, to find meaning in the gaps of knowledge. Yet, for all the advancements in science, for all the tools we've created to dig deeper, see further, and know more, there are still places, like Punt, that we cannot touch. It is a reminder of the limits of our understanding. And perhaps, that is the very heart of Punt's power, the mystery it carries with it. The fact that it may never be fully discovered only adds to the intensity of its allure. In a world where everything seems to have an answer, Punt stands as a defiant symbol of the unknown, a realm that escapes us no matter how much we yearn to grasp it. It stirs something inside us, a desire to keep searching, to keep hoping, to keep dreaming. The tales of Punt have always intertwined with the greatest spiritual and philosophical questions of the human experience. What is the nature of knowledge? What does it mean to search for something that may never be found? It's easy to forget, in a world obsessed with facts and proof, that some of the most meaningful parts of life are shaped by the things we cannot see, the things we can only imagine. Punt, in all its mystery, is a testament to this truth. Whether it was a real land or simply a story made grand by the passing centuries, it represents the very heart of human culture, the need to seek, to wonder, and to dream. Even if Punt is not a physical place, its influence lingers. In every culture, in every myth, there are places like Punt, lands that stand at the edge of reality, places that cannot be fully known, yet are beloved for what they represent. They are symbols of possibility, of realms untouched by time, where all things are possible. They stand as a challenge to the mind and spirit, asking, can we accept that there are some things we may never fully understand? As the years go by, the search for Punt continues. Scholars pore over ancient texts, comparing fragments of stories, seeking clues buried deep in the sands of time. Archaeologists comb through ruins, hoping for a sign, a whisper of something from a lost age. Yet, the more we try to define it, the more elusive it becomes. Every theory, every discovery only adds layers to its enigma, making it both more real and more distant. It's as if Punt was never meant to be found in the way we expect it to be. Perhaps, in the end, it was always meant to remain a legend, a myth that speaks to something greater than itself. And yet, in its uncertainty, Punt teaches us a profound lesson. It shows us that there is something beautiful in the search itself. There is beauty in the way humans continue to wonder, to ask questions, and to dream, even when the answers remain out of reach. Punt, whether a place or a symbol, will always be a reminder of how the mysteries of the world shape us, not by what we find, but by what we continue to seek. In the end, maybe that is the most important thing Punt has given us. It reminds us of the very nature of myth itself, how myths endure, not because they are necessarily true in the conventional sense, but because they capture something eternal. They stir something deep within us, something primal, a yearning for meaning that surpasses facts and dates. And even as the world changes, as empires rise and fall, the stories of places like Punt continue to live on, in our dreams, in our art, in our literature. As the world continues to search for the boundaries of the real and the imagined, Punt stands at the threshold, its mysteries both tantalizing and eternal. It is a place that may never be found, but in that very fact, it becomes something even more powerful, a reflection of everything we have yet to discover, a beacon calling out to us from the edges of history. And perhaps that is the ultimate mystery of Punt. It exists not in the places we can find, but in the spaces we cannot yet reach, in the dreams that lie just beyond the edge of the known world. There is something about the unknown that calls to us. It haunts us in quiet moments, lingers in our thoughts when we least expect it, and stirs a longing that cannot be easily explained. Punt is one of those places, both real and elusive, a legend that pulses with mystery and whispers of secrets that no one can ever fully uncover. The stories of Punt have traveled across centuries, from the earliest Egyptian texts to modern-day searches. Its legacy continues to captivate hearts and minds because it speaks to something timeless in human nature, the desire to discover, to understand, to reach beyond what is known. It is not just the golden riches of Punt or the beauty of its landscapes that have made it legendary, but the very enigma that surrounds it. Was it a real place, a distant kingdom that once thrived with life, or was it a creation of myth, a paradise woven from the hopes and dreams of ancient storytellers? Perhaps it is both. And that, in itself, is part of the allure. Punt exists as a mirror, reflecting our desire to dream, to believe in something greater than ourselves, and to feel that the world still holds mysteries worth pursuing. As we think about Punt, we are reminded of the deeper quest within all of us, the quest for knowledge, for truth, for understanding. We live in a world that has mapped the farthest reaches of the earth, split atoms, and reached the stars. Yet, still, we are left with questions that seem too vast, too impossible to answer. And Punt, in its mystery, embodies this paradox, this tension between the known and the unknown. It is a place that may never be found, and yet its existence continues to shape our understanding of the world. Every time we attempt to search for it, to pinpoint its location, we find ourselves questioning the very nature of exploration itself. What is it that we truly seek when we chase the unknown? There is an undeniable pull to places like Punt, which transcend the limits of geography and become something more, a symbol of adventure, a testament to the human drive to push forward, to reach the furthest edges of the world. The stories of Egyptian expeditions to Punt speak to this urge. They show us that even the most powerful civilizations are not immune to the call of the unknown. It is not just kings and queens who sought Punt, but the priests, the explorers, the storytellers, those whose lives were shaped by the belief that there was something more to discover beyond the horizon. This search for Punt speaks to something ancient within us. It taps into the yearning for discovery that has always defined human history. From the days when the Egyptians set sail in search of this fabled land, to the modern-day explorers who sift through ruins and ancient texts, the quest for Punt has been a journey fueled by belief in something beyond the immediate, belief in the possibility that the unknown might hold the answers we seek. And yet, there is a bittersweet quality to this search. The more we learn, the more elusive Punt becomes. Every discovery brings new questions, and every new clue only deepens the mystery. But maybe, in the end, that is what makes Punt so enduring. It is the fact that it cannot be fully known, that it remains just beyond our grasp, that keeps us coming back, generation after generation. In this way, Punt becomes more than a physical location, it becomes a reflection of something deeper within us, a reminder that there will always be more to discover, more to wonder about, and more to dream. As Egypt looked to Punt, so too does the modern world look to its own mysteries. The ancient Egyptians may have been fascinated by Punt for its wealth and beauty, but they were also drawn to its spiritual aura, its connection to the divine. Punt was more than a place, it was a symbol of something greater, something transcendent. For the Egyptians, it was a land where the gods walked among mortals, where the very air seemed charged with a sense of magic and possibility. Today, Punt still carries that same weight, that same sense of awe and wonder. It has become a symbol of the unknown, a land of endless potential where anything might be possible. And so, the fascination with Punt lives on. It continues to inspire artists, writers, and thinkers who look to the distant past for meaning, for answers to questions that still resonate today. Punt has found a home not only in history but in the imagination. It has become a place of myth, a landscape painted in broad strokes of wonder and mystery, a place where the lines between reality and fantasy blur. And that, perhaps, is where its true power lies. The myth of Punt speaks to the eternal longing for something beyond ourselves, a longing that has driven humanity forward for centuries. The Egyptians, with their great temples and monuments, sought out Punt as a land of divine favor, a place that held the keys to prosperity and spiritual power. But what they found, or what they believed they found, was not just wealth and incense. They found a story that would continue to echo through the ages, a story that would live on in the hearts of all who came after them. It is fitting, then, that Punt's legacy should live on in the mystery it leaves behind. For in that mystery lies the very essence of human curiosity and imagination, the drive to seek, to wonder, and to believe in something greater than what we can see. Punt may not be a place that can be found on a map, but it is a place that exists in the collective consciousness of humanity. It is a land of stories, a land of dreams, a land that speaks to the heart of who we are as people. As we reflect on the enduring power of Punt, we realize that its mystery is not something to be solved, but something to be cherished. It is a reminder of our need to search, to question, to imagine. And in that search, we find something far more precious than gold or incense. We find a connection to the deepest parts of ourselves, to the dreams and hopes that have always driven us to explore the world and beyond. Through Punt, we see that the true value of a mystery is not in its resolution, but in its ability to inspire, to keep us reaching for the unknown, and to remind us that some stories are meant to be lived, not solved.